Well, welcome to the Secure 2.0 webinar, Implications for Retirees and Retirement Savers. The Secure 2.0 Act was signed into law at the end of last year. It's considered a sequel to the Secure Act of 2019, which stands for Setting Up Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement. This act is meant to bolster savings both for individuals and for employer retirement plans. So to have this conversation today, I'm the host, Jelena Ogilvie, partner and wealth advisor here at Principal Wealth Partners, joined once again by Bob Paolucci, our founder and CEO. Bob, welcome.
Good morning.
So one of the issues that we're already finding with the Secure 2.0 Act is there were 100 provisions in this act. There's a lot to go through. We clearly can't do that today. And so the idea was to highlight maybe the 5 key features that we believe impact our clients and see if we can highlight those quickly. And we welcome any questions at the end that others may have on it.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Secure Act 2.0 signed just before the new year, so late December of 2022, was buried inside of the omnibus spending bill, the $1.7 trillion spending bill. The full bill was 4,155 unread pages by anyone who actually signed off on it. And we will prove that to you as we talk through some of these provisions that impact retirement plan contributions, mandatory distributions, catch-up contributions. There's a lot to go through. Again, we're going to focus our time on maybe the 5 big changes that impact our clients.
Absolutely.
Great.
And I think to do that, we'll kick it off. And I think one of the most impactful changes is talking about the required minimum distributions.
Absolutely. For years we have talked to clients and ourselves about, the mandatory distribution rules for pre-tax retirement accounts. Generally speaking, it was 70 and a half going back to pre-2020 for first-time takers of the distribution. You had an extension that can run into the next year based on your birthday. So they've cleaned it up a little bit in 2020 with the Secure Act 1.0. Now Secure Act 2.0 changes it a little bit. So the old rule, which was relatively new, changed to age 72. So if you are age 72, any pre-tax IRA accounts and inactive 401ks, you would be forced to take a distribution if you turn 72 in that calendar year by the end of the year. I'm just going to keep this one very simple.
And that was a big change at the time.
Big change. Yeah, they pushed it out a year and a half. And now the new rule, effective this year, is really now age 73. What's also very different is if you were born in 1960 or later, you won't have to take a minimum distribution. Remember, you can take a distribution from your retirement account, but you're not forced to take a distribution until 75 if you're born in 1960 or later. So that's a pretty significant change. I always joked with clients about the penalty for forgetting to take your distribution, because it was really the largest penalty that the IRS would assess of 50% if you forgot to take your distribution. And I think, generally speaking, those who are going to forget some type of IRS ruling or, requirement distribution tend to be those that are, above the age of 70. So I always found that to be very unfair. Well, they addressed that. And what they have done is they cut the penalty in half down to 25% instead of 50%. And then there are some provisions for a even more reduced penalty, assuming you've made an attempt to correct it. So that is a pretty big change that will impact our clients That will impact our retirement planning tools, our forecasts, how we generate income for clients. Nothing's bad. At the end of the day, you just don't have to take a mandatory distribution. Benefits those who view a distribution as a tax penalty more than anything else. So for us, when we do our math of how to draw down portfolios and accounts and securities in retirement, it's going to change some of the way we do that. So not a big deal, but it will change a little bit.
Absolutely. And for a firm that's so focused on financial planning, this is a very big consideration. And I think another reason why financial planners can be an important piece of the portfolio. So
yeah, we view this as a positive. The beneficiaries of this change really are the ones that don't need the income, therefore the taxation that comes along with the forced income. So it's not a big positive for all. It's not a negative for anybody.
Right. Absolutely.
So, view it that way.
That's great. Thank you. And I think another provision is for anyone that's listening or watching that is over the age of 50. You're probably aware of the catch-up contributions that you are allowed. And there are some big changes here.
Yeah, we're going to keep it simple. We're just referring to IRA catch-up contributions. There are some new rules around 401k or corporate retirement plans, 401k, 403b, 457 catch-up contributions. Those are very tricky. For now, we're just going to talk about IRA catch-up contributions, which are currently $1,000 for anyone age 50 or older. What they've done is they've added a slight inflation indexing to it. So expect catch-up contributions to increase by a rate of inflation, but probably by no more than the $100 here or there. So it's something. It's not that big of a deal, but it is something.
I think it's a big step considering that they've never increased it for inflation before, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also just to clarify, the $1,000, the catch up is on top of the $6,500 that you are allowed for 2023 to contribute.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Moving on, I think we are so fortunate that many of our clients here are charitably inclined. So QCDs, which stand for qualified charitable distributions, are also impacted in this.
That's right. So the qualified charitable distribution rule was really set around the required minimum distribution age, 70 and a half, pre-2020. So the new rule still allows people to take a qualified charitable distribution from their retirement account at or above 70 and a half. The change that they've made is they've indexed it for inflation. So that $100,000 maximum, which when withdrawn from a retirement account, it is a non-taxable distribution, assuming it goes directly to a qualified charity.
Correct.
That $100,000 limit will increase with inflation starting in 2024. There is a new provision that we will reference in a document that we will attach to this presentation that allows a $50,000 distribution to come out and fund a charitable remainder trust and a few other charitable strategies, most of which at the $50,000 level you would never fund at $50,000. It would be substantially more because of the record keeping involved, the plan creation with an attorney, the cost of that stuff. It's quite complicated, but there is an option for it.
Okay. So. That's great. And I think also this is an example of what added to some of the confusion with the Secure 2.0. This is one of the provisions that doesn't take effect this year. It takes effect next year.
Correct. And this one's difficult, right? The behind the scenes, as we're going through this enormous document, we are finding typos. We are finding a bunch of confusion around start dates, effective dates, coverage dates, ages, which inflation indicator are they tying to? It's quite vague. So this is meant to provide some direction on what appears to be a very, very vague bill that has passed. So yes,
Absolutely.
you will hear us talk to starting immediately, effective 2024, effective 2025. This bill is all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and another provision that is candidly my favorite, I think of all of these, is the new provisions on 529 accounts. This is something that I think we have conversations all the time with clients that are questioning, are they overfunding their 529? Is my child not going to go to college? Are they going to get a scholarship? What happens with this money if we don't use it for qualified education? So if we can go through this.
Sure. Under the current rules, you have to view a Section 529 plan college savings account as an educational account, and I think you should continue to do so. The rules have changed a little bit. I don't think once we go through this that they will make a big deal for people viewing these accounts as 529 plus retirement. I think you still have to view these accounts as 529 college savings vehicles. But under the current rule, college savings plans, 529 plans are used for college related costs, qualified education expenses. And when you look at qualified education expenses, they are quite broad. Each state, most states have their own plan where they will provide some benefit to the contributor. But the real benefit of these plans is you put money into them, they earn dividends, they appreciate over a long period of time, and then the money comes out, if used for college, tax-free, right? So if the money comes out and it's used for qualified education expenses, the money is completely tax-free. So then the question comes up, well, what if there's excess money? And we won't talk about why there could be excess money, because there are many reasons. But if there's excess money, this rule is trying to address a scenario where there is excess money. And the best they could come up with is there could be some amount of money that can convert into a Roth IRA from a 529 plan, a college account, into a Roth IRA. The key here is for the beneficiary.
Correct.
So, Julina, for your oldest, she is the beneficiary of a 529 plan. This does not allow you, Julina, to take money from the 529 plan
for
and
myself.
put it into a Roth IRA for yourself. This
Correct.
is for your daughter.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much? Well, let's start with what we actually know, because the rest is going to get a little vague. There will be a $35,000 lifetime rollover limit, meaning for your daughter, because they do track Social Security numbers on the tax forms, she is allowed a $35,000 total lifetime rollover limit from a 529 plan. The amount that is eligible to be converted into a Roth from a 529 plan is the greater of her earned income or her adjusted gross income in the year that this is done, or the then contribution limit to a Roth IRA whenever it is done, the lesser of the two. Right. So whenever one is lower, that will be what's allowed, keeping in mind with the $35,000 lifetime max. However, to qualify for this, the 529 plan, the college account, must have existed for 15 years. Yeah. Right. So this isn't something that you can do a few years out now that you're hearing it and wanting to make a conversion to a retirement account, a few years from now. The account has to be opened 15 years in advance.
Which I think is an interesting point, because if you do the math, basically the child has to be 2 years old.
Generally speaking.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this
or
needs to be
plus
done
minus
early.
5 years or so, depending on when they go to school,
Yes, fair.
depending if it's grad school, all that fun stuff. So,
Yep.
so you're right. Uh,
It needs to be done earlier than most people might start planning for college education for their kids.
Correct. And we were talking about this before we started filming. It really, the message this is sending is, if you want to have the opportunity to do this in the future, you might as well open that 529 plan sooner, upon birth of this child and upon issuance of a social security number, to or shortly thereafter, to be able to take advantage of this way down the road, assuming they don't change the laws in the future, right? Otherwise, you'll be waiting a very long time.
And if it's forcing people to do it earlier, that would only help with the asset growth, because time usually is on your side in terms of growing the assets.
Correct. There is one other provision. So in the record keeping of this, I truly don't understand how they're going to be able to do this. Contributions and growth of contributions that came into 529 plans in the past 5 years will be excluded from the calculation of what's available in the college account.
Correct. So you better fund it early.
So contributions and asset growth will be excluded from the available pot of money that can be converted over to a Roth.
Right.
Now, what I find fascinating, I grew up in the operations part of the investment world, and I worked for years in retirement account coding and mnemonics, and how tax forms are created, and the processing of these transactions and the correcting of the mistakes that come along from time to time. I can tell you that there's very little record keeping on college accounts for this type of stuff. So, which tells me that in the future, maybe the not too distant future, these rules here will have to be clarified substantially for anyone to be able to execute on this. Or if they're not, this is another gray area where everyone might be able to take advantage of this, because the record keeping is so light that it would be hard to prove. You know what I mean? So, and for those listening, if you've ever heard of a backdoor Roth contribution, that was a mistake. You go back years ago, the backdoor Roth contribution came from a loophole, and it was really just poor language around what could and couldn't be done years ago. And what was born out of that is something called the backdoor Roth that not a lot of people are eligible for. And it's not really a thing, but if you read the code this way and you do certain things, you could technically do this transaction. I view this as another odd loophole that lacks tons of detail.
And
So,
maybe for that reason, it's not effective this year. It's effective in 2024. They've got 1 year to
you betcha.
Figure it out.
You betcha.
So more to come.
More to come.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. By the way, that old job at Fidelity sounded really exciting.
Listen, I learned so much. So.
Well, the last thing we wanted to highlight is actually a number of provisions that we decided to kind of bucket into one, which there are a number of updates in terms of how we think about Roth, which you just mentioned. So if we could talk about just a few of that we think are really some of the more important ones, and especially how they affect small business owners too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to take a step back, when we talk about Roth, right, the benefit of a Roth is really when you retire. The treatment of this type of retirement account when you retire is very different than other types of accounts. Why? So a traditional IRA or traditional 401k dollars, when you make a contribution, generally speaking, you get a deduction of your income, right? So if you make $100,000 and you put $10,000 into a 401k, your taxable income is now $90,000.
Correct.
So you save on tax. What happens is that money, hopefully, if you invest it well, and certainly if we invest it for you, it will be done well, will grow and compound over a long period of time. When you take distributions in the future, let's call it when you retire, that money will be taxable to you, right?
Correct.
With a Roth, you actually don't have any tax benefit upfront, whether that's a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA. There's no tax benefit upfront. You just put money into a retirement account. The benefit comes later in life when you go to pull it out. When you pull the money out, all the growth, the principal, everything comes out tax-free, right?
All of it.
So that's the benefit of a Roth. There are things that you can do to get money into a Roth subject to income limits, like convert traditional retirement money that hasn't been taxed into a Roth by taxing the money. It's called a conversion. When you move traditional IRA or traditional 401k money over to a Roth, you are taxed at the time of conversion.
Correct.
Then you sort of start the clock on, well, if this grows for a long period of time, I was better off paying the tax now than later.
Versus later.
Yeah, just a basic concept. So when you hear people talk about Roths, really the benefit is the tax-free distributions that come upon retirement later in life. Nothing up front. All the benefit is at the end.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so now, what's new? The availability of Roth inside of a SEP IRA, the availability of a Roth inside of a simple IRA. It's brand new. I can assure you that there isn't a single custodian who has updated their documents to allow Roth SEP or Roth Simple as of yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's so new. And it was done, generally speaking, on New Year's Eve of this past year. And these types of changes, it changes 1099 forms, it changes account opening forms, it changes website view, it changes your statement. There's now a separate record keeping. There's a lot that has to happen for this to take place.
It just can't happen overnight.
Can't happen overnight.
Yep. Okay.
So that's number one. So look for that to likely roll out at some point this year, hopefully. Employers can now match contributions on a Roth basis. So if you work for a big company, when they do their match, ERISA rules have always said that match contributions have to be pre-tax. There's actually a record-keeping bucket behind the scenes for all of this stuff. And the new rule is that employer matches can now go into the Roth bucket, this new bucket, which means there's a new code, which means there's more record keeping, right?
Yes.
So these changes have to roll out through the industry. This is optional. This is not mandatory, right? Because they know if they made it mandatory, they would have to put a start date of 10 years from now, because there's so much that has to go on behind the scenes for big companies, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, right? It's TSAs, all sorts of stuff. It's a logistical nightmare.
Absolutely.
But there is an option for employers to make matching contributions in a Roth. That is new.
Okay.
So catch-up contributions can also be made in a Roth. That's also new. And there are no mandatory distributions required on Roth 401ks. So again, these are all record-keeping issues that have to be updated throughout the custodian world, throughout the record-keeping world for all these provisions. and we'll likely start to see that sometime this year. So if you're listening and you're still working, you may or may not be able to do any of this yet. It's
Absolutely.
coming at some point this year. There are no dates on any of these things. It's a suggestion. It's optional. So
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think this page is a great indication as well that it is just created more options for employees and how they should be investing in their plan, which always creates, from a financial planning standpoint, a lot of questions around what is the best for that individual. So I think these are important to at least be aware of.
That's right.
And to consider. So thank you for
Yeah,
going.
and there are many other changes, but those changes impact not so many people. So that's why we chose not to cover them, at least in this video. We will have a piece attached to the video that we send out that will cover more of the bill in a little bit more detail. But again, whether you Google it, you go to the government's website, you go to Fidelity's website, Schwab, wherever you Google Vanguard, these things are so loose and so gray and so vague that they're just providing a little bit of direction with a low level of conviction around most of these things.
Absolutely.
So more to come. We want to make sure we're not giving you legal advice, tax advice, but we do want to keep you informed and up to date on a lot of these changes.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully that this webinar is at least giving everyone an idea that we have been paying attention to this. We're aware. There is going to be more to come, but we are happy to have these conversations as we're meeting with our clients, and we are open and here for anyone that has additional questions.
Yeah, and these are net positives for savers, for workers, for individuals in retirement. You just have, more options, let's say, and slightly higher limits. So all in all, it's not a negative, it's a positive. It's just a little vague at this point.
Absolutely correct. Well, thanks, Bob, again, as always, for the insights. And again, I'll say it, we are here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us at Principal Wealth Partners.